Hello, and welcome today to one of the Young Lung Cancer Patient Education sessions on traveling with lung cancer. As many of you know, whether you are a caregiver or a patient, traveling is something that we all want to do, but can sometimes be a little bit stressful when it's your first time traveling, or maybe it's the first time traveling after a new treatment. So today I have with me two other stage 4 lung cancer patients that I'm going to introduce you to that have all, including myself, been traveling with lung cancer, living our lives. So I'm going to turn it over to Caroline to introduce herself, and then we'll go from there.
Hello, my name is Caroline, and I have been living with lung cancer for about 15 months, and I have EGFR exon 19, and I'm stage 4.
Thank you. Samantha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Samantha. I was diagnosed nearly a year ago, which is insane. I have a HER2 mutation and I'm at stage 4.
Great, thank you. And as most of you all know, I've been on this journey the longest at a little bit over 5 years, stage 4 with EGFR, exon 19 deletion lung cancer. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn it over to a slide presentation to give you some more information on traveling with late stage or even really any type of lung cancer.
All right. So as Leah said, we all love to travel. It's one of those things that makes you feel alive. So here is our presentation. And in the 15 months since I've been diagnosed, I have been to Italy twice, to Switzerland, to Florida twice, to Chicago 2 or 3 times, and then lots of little trips to Maine and Cape Cod in the New England area.
So since my diagnosis, I have done quite a few trips stateside, but I also took a really big trip this last Thanksgiving to Japan. It was really mentally tough for me to do, and we'll go into that later on in the slide deck, but I had an amazing time, and yeah, Japan was a really big trip.
And as you all know, I've been at this for 5 years. So the picture in here of Disney World is actually about 8 weeks after my diagnosis, when I was still not feeling totally great with my kids. And my travel is a little different because a lot of it is focused around my children and my family, and also some of our friends. But as they have said, traveling does make you feel alive, and it also helps build the memories that all of us are wanting to stockpile as we journey down this path of lung cancer.
All right, so most important, of course, consult your oncologist. If they say that you are not well enough to travel, then do not travel. Do not put yourself into any risk like that. But talk to your healthcare team, and they can give you advice on what is safe and the things that you can do. So in general, we have some suggestions to give you as people living with lung cancer, but of course, always talk to your oncologist. So in terms of planning, I've really kind of figured out with traveling that there are being vacations and there are seeing vacations. And you have to figure out what is best for you at this point in your cancer journey. Do you want to go someplace and you just want to get away and you want to relax and enjoy yourself? I know last February, actually, we flew down to Florida and just stayed at a nice resort and didn't even leave the property. And it was exactly what I needed. It was just a couple months after diagnosis, and I just needed warm weather and to be comfortable. Or do you feel up to going and seeing the world and being active and doing a lot of activities? So the first thing that you want to do is figure out, do I want this kind of vacation, that kind of vacation, or some kind of blend?
Yeah, I mean, you both know me very well. I'm all about the seeing one. All of my trips have been super active. Um, and it's just being aware of what your capabilities are, right? Because even if you are a super active person, but you might have some issues going on, you need to be mindful of that. We went to Japan and we probably walked around 35,000 steps a day. And honestly, that was a bit too much for myself. And so after the trip, I was just absolutely exhausted. While I had the best time, it really was draining, and I almost needed another vacation to get over that trip. So just being mindful of what your capabilities are currently, compared to maybe what you had prior to diagnosis, would be a really important factor, I think, to consider.
And Leah, anything you want to add?
No, I agree. And I think too, it depends on kind of where you are in your journey. The first trip we took was to Disney World, which is a big undertaking. And I know a lot of us have young children, and it's great because it was entertaining to the kids. There wasn't a lot of entertaining, but it is, like Samantha said, a lot of walking and, just being prepared and preparing the people you travel with that you may need to take breaks, or that, you're going to schedule something in the morning and then leave the midday empty and then in the evening, and just really preparing yourself realistically and those people that are traveling with you.
So another thing that you might want to think about when you're planning a vacation, or travel in general is, do you want to just go as individuals or do you want to go on a tour? So individual, there's pros and cons. You have to arrange everything. You get to the airport, there's not necessarily a car waiting for you attached to a tour company or anything. You have to arrange for the car, you have to take the train, or you have to do everything. But you have total control. For tours, it is nice because they carry your luggage around and do all kinds of things for you, and you don't have to take the mental energy to plan what the itinerary is or anything. However, you do kind of have to follow it, and you have to go at the pace of the tour. So I know, like, personally, being on a TKI and sometimes not feeling well, or sometimes needing to find a restroom or something, the idea of being on a tour kind of freaks me out because I just don't want to let other people down or make them wait or anything. But I definitely like see the advantages of having everything just taken care of.
Yeah, I would echo that, Caroline. Like the individual component, and knowing that, okay, if I do need a rest day because I'm just exhausted, I can take that rest day and not be a burden to everyone else on the tour. I think I would feel really guilty, just kind of interrupting the tour if I had issues or problems. So I think, me personally, moving forward, I'm always going to be doing individual things, because it just gives that level of control that I need, because I just don't know how I'm going to feel on each given day.
I agree. And one other thing that we've done is, because we've been stayed in the United States, we've gone out of the country, but sometimes it's just my husband and I, but a lot of times it's the kids with us or other family members or friends. And we have found that if you contact a travel agent and not necessarily book a tour, but ask the travel agent to help you figure out what are the things that are must-dos, and then give your list if you already kind of did your own research, and they can help you figure out the best way to kind of navigate those so it makes sense, so you're not backtracking or whatnot. But then also you ultimately tell the travel agent, like, I want to do such and such on Monday, such and such on Tuesday. I'm better in the evening. Mornings are better for me. And then you have a little bit more control than just a straight out tour where you're kind of at the mercy of what's the tour is doing.
I think that's great advice. And then also travel agents can, if they have contacts in that area, arrange things like the transfers from the airport and other kind of things. And I've never gone on a cruise, but a cruise could be a way for doing kind of in between these two things, where you're on the ship and then there are excursions that you could go on, but you can do things yourself as well.
We did that with our kids a few summers ago. We did a cruise, and it was perfect because the kids can go and do all the things on the ship all the time. And then, I could rest or I could pick and choose. And that was just an easy way to kind of accommodate all different speeds of people wanting to do or sit.
Okay, so location considerations. You have to think about how physically active you'll need to be. It might determine the location. I live in Boston. The Azores are only 4 hours away or something like that. They look incredible. We had friends who went, but I think with all the hills and all the like active stuff that's there, it's probably not a great location for me. We spent 10 days in Venice in October and November. It was an amazing vacation. It's flat, except for going over bridges. That was great for my lungs. So really thinking about what you're capable of and does that location match up? I always actually Google and look to see what cancer centers are in the areas where I'm traveling. So, if you're worried about that, then choosing destinations with high quality medical care is good. And then also looking and checking ahead of time to avoid areas with outbreaks of infectious diseases, especially sorry, if you are immune compromised from your cancer treatments.
So the high quality medical care one made me chuckle a little bit because a lot of my bucket list places I actually want to go do not have the best medical care whatsoever. And so we've prioritized the list based on medical care, which is why we went to Japan as our first international trip, because we knew how outstanding their medical treatment was. I also have an amazing insurance plan where I'm covered in any country I go to, and medevac is also covered. But regardless of medevac or not, I really still wanted really good medical care to be within a couple miles reaching distance of me, just for that level of comfort, right? Because it's a very big step, or it was for me anyway, to make that first leap of an international trip after my diagnosis. And so having almost like that comfort of if something goes wrong, that there will be good quality care for me was imperative for my mental well-being.
Great advice. I was diagnosed in 2019, right before the pandemic. So I did not travel after Disney World. That was in February. And then the pandemic was in March. I didn't travel for some time because of the COVID outbreak. I mean, nobody really could, but even once things like let up, we were very cautious. We didn't fly, we drove, we stayed in either Airbnbs or cabins instead of like big hotels or condos. So you do have to be, and obviously we kind of have a we can have our hands on the pulse of what's going on in the United States. But when you think of traveling internationally, I think you really do have to look at what kind of diseases or outbreaks they're having to make sure that you're not putting yourself in danger.
There may be healthcare timing considerations, and Samantha, who has done infusion therapies, is going to talk a little bit later. But I and Samantha actually as well have got a lot of have had a lot of thoracentesis procedures, and so I always planned mine for 10 days before I was going to fly, so that I could breathe, but if there was any air that got trapped during the procedure, it would kind of be able to dissipate before I was going to fly. So you may want to think about the timing of those kind of procedures before you travel. And of course, work with your healthcare team.
Yeah, and I was actually shocked that while I was going through the thoracentesis every 3 weeks or a month, that they were like, yeah, you still can travel. And I'm like, excuse me, I can? And I was kind of taken aback that you could still travel with fluid potentially rising in your lung. But Caroline, I don't know how often you were being drained, but for me, every 3 weeks, like you said, if I got drained at that 3 week mark, I then had that 3 weeks of being able to be okay to travel and explore and everything. And I was really taken aback that they were comfortable with me traveling. But again, speak to your oncologist about it to make sure that everything's good for you personally. But it was good to know that even though this was occurring for me, that I could still have some flexibility in traveling. It's also really weird to see that picture of a different set of lungs that shows fluid, because I've only ever seen mine before. So I'm presuming that's yours, Caroline.
Yes, that's mine. And that's not even as full as it was in the beginning.
Right, right. Yep,
So when I traveled, I still had fluid because they would only drain 1.5 liters at a time, and there was
correct.
still a significant amount left. But I still was able to do more. So I did get it done 10 days before we went to Lake Como in Italy. And we stayed in Verona, and there are hills, and I was able to go up and down the hills slowly, but I could do it. But I couldn't have done it if I hadn't gotten that drain. So, some advice about booking and traveling. So there's pros and cons of different transportation types. So planes, sometimes it's the only place to get someplace, but it can cause medical issues such as blood clots, and maybe Samantha will speak a little bit about that because she had some experience. I love trains because they have, like in Europe, because they have restrooms on them. So I don't feel trapped and I don't get nervous. But they can be unreliable. I love Italy, but sometimes the trains come on time and sometimes they don't. Boats. We took boats and the ferries in Lake Como, and on board there are like larger boats. There are restrooms. You can tell I'm someone who takes Tagrisso, and that is an important thing to me. But you may feel nauseous, so you might need to take certain things with you to help prevent that. Buses may or may not have restrooms, and there is a high chance of nausea. So I personally avoid them because I just know it's going to be kind of trouble. And if you travel by car, you have total control. You can pull over anytime you want. You can go wherever you want. You can rest. You can whatever, you're on your own schedule.
So yeah, let's hit on planes. So, prior to my diagnosis, I was an avid traveler and I would also travel for work on a plane probably at least once a month. And my first plane ride was actually to Japan. We had to take a domestic flight first. And I was actually texting Caroline as we were sat, my husband and I were sat in the seat because I was having a panic attack of the fact that I had lung cancer. My lungs are not 100%, and I'm in this metal tube that is about to take off, and just feeling like absolutely terrified that something awful could happen to my lungs on the plane. Of course, nothing did, but the mental component of it is a very big thing, or it was for me at least. And so mentally preparing for these different modes of transportation after your diagnosis, you might not think is something to consider, but it really is. Luckily, I got through it. Caroline helped me a lot. In fact, my husband thanked Caroline for getting me through it. But it was definitely a big deal for me to get on that plane. And then the other thing is the blood clots. So I'm not on blood thinners, so I take a low dose aspirin. And so I took a higher dose aspirin for the plane rides just to ensure that I didn't get a blood clot. And I also walked around every hour. I was really paranoid about getting a blood clot because 6 months prior to my diagnosis, I got a blood clot in my leg due to flying on a plane. So I know it's a very real risk for me. So I definitely did lots of walking, lots of stretching. My husband even massaged my car for me, so I'm very grateful for that. Just making sure that that blood clot possibility was as low as it could possibly be for me.
And I think, for me, planes equal germs. Um, when I would fly with the kids when they were little by myself to meet my husband or whatnot, when he was traveling, and it was always the germs I was concerned about. And then the kids got older and I was like, they've got built their immune system. And then I get lung cancer, and then you're back and then COVID happens. So then everybody's hyper aware of germs. So for me, planes, more than I do think about the the blood clots and whatnot, are the germs. So I do try to bring all the things with me to disinfect my area. And also, I still fly with a mask on just for the fear of somebody behind you, next to you, something with the flu or whatnot, and being out of town and coming down with something. So that's my big tip on the planes. The boat, we did the cruise thing, and some people will say, oh, everybody gets a stomach bug. One person gets something, everybody gets it. Again, it was just be as careful as you could, wash hands, take hand sanitizer, and try to be outside as much as possible. So those are my kind of tips on those.
And I will say, it's totally up to you on whether you share this or not with the people that are working for these different transportation types. But, I got a really awful seat on one of my planes that I was not comfortable with. And I knew it would be potentially more susceptible to getting germs because of where I was sat. And so speaking with the agent, the person who's in charge or what have you around these different transportation types might be beneficial to you sometimes, making them aware of what you're going through, because like most of us, no one could tell that we have stage 4 lung cancer. And so they're not going to know unless you mention it to them, and then likely they're going to be very accommodating.
So some advice about booking flights. So I book flights all the time and I cancel them all the time. I have become a Delta person, actually partially for this reason, because right on the app, on the first page, you can say refundable fares only. And they are more expensive, but they're definitely cheaper than losing the whole airfare because you have to cancel. So, um, uh, anyway, so think about refunding things. I mean, we went to Venice kind of, we weren't planning to go to Venice. We were actually planning to go to England, but I just wasn't feeling that well. We were going to go in the beginning of October. I just wasn't feeling that well, so we canceled it last minute. And then I started feeling better maybe like a week later. So then I just got on and looked and I said, "Oh, I can fly to Venice. We can fly to Venice," and just kind of made it happen. So it really does give you a lot of flexibility. There used to be this little app for looking up airfares called Hipmunk, I think, and they had something called the Agony Index. And unfortunately, they're like out of business now, but it was such a great way of putting it. So thinking about flying overnight, are there day ones that would be more comfortable, or are there only night flights? Um, do I want to try to get an extra legroom seat, just so that I'm not so miserable when I'm flying? You can, on many airlines, upgrade just one segment. So if there is a longer segment and then a shorter one, then have that extra legroom for the longer segment, and then just have a regular economy seat, or whatever, for the shorter one. And as Samantha was saying before, getting up and moving around, I also move around like pretty much every 45 to 90 minutes. Um, so I always need an aisle seat. Like it's the most important thing to me is having an aisle seat. So that might be something that you want to look for when you're booking flights. And then also transfer times. Um, I don't know why, but sometimes when you book, like they either want to give you, like a 40-minute transfer time when you have to like get your luggage, go through customs, go through passport control, whatever, and then get to your next. It's like too much, or sorry, too little time, really. Too much to do in too little time. I love having a personal bag with a trolley sleeve so that when I've had to run through airports since diagnosis, like but not having so many things like on shoulders and whatever, just having it all on my roller bag really helps. And one thing I did encounter is, I thought I was going to kind of game the system a little bit. I mean, not really, but it's hard for me to run through an airport. We did have a short transfer time, so I registered as needing a wheelchair because I figured, well, if we don't get there to the gate in time, it's not my fault. They're gonna, have to put us on some other flight. But once I did that, it actually canceled the fact that we had bought seats in the exit row, because you can't be in the exit row if you need accommodations like a wheelchair, which makes sense. But it's something to think about.
Yeah, and I will summarize, Caroline, like I get anxious and stressed very quickly when it comes to travel, because a lot of it is out of my control. So as many things that you can control that you mentioned, the better to make it less stressful. Lowering our stress, having stage 4 lung cancer is very important. So just making things as easy as possible for you, the better. So please book how you deem fit to make that process a lot smoother.
And the other thing Todd and I have done, my husband, is when he books flights a lot of times, or if I do, he's usually the one that does. He'll put us in an aisle and a window, in case the flight isn't full, then even if it is, the person doesn't really want to sit in the middle anyway. So then I'll offer my window seat to them. They usually switch, but we have lucked out in some cases that we end up with a whole row of 3, which is kind of nice too. Gives you a little more space, and you can kind of put your feet up, put your feet down kind of thing.
There is a site that I've started using that I really love as well, called Flights From. You don't book anything through it. It just gives you information. So I can put in Boston and it will tell me every place that I can fly in the world nonstop, because I have found we've done some trips to Europe nonstop, but some where we have to transfer to another plane, a layover. And there's just always, as Samantha was just saying, it just increases your stress so much. So I actually have started, we have a trip to Italy coming up and a trip to London coming up. And I partially picked Rome and London because those were places that you can fly nonstop from Boston. So just having this website, it's just kind of nice to see what's possible.
Yeah, nonstop is very important to me. Although I will say, again, it's down to personal preference, right? Because someone who maybe has higher anxiety about flying or is really concerned about blood clots, XYZ reason, maybe you do want 2 flights that are shorter. So you don't have that nonstop flight that's a longer duration in time. So again, it's totally personal preference.
That's a really good point. And just one more thing about this site, I like it too because if you can see kind of at the bottom of the screen, it will even tell you where you can fly nonstop and like which days that airline offers flights on those days, which just makes it a lot easier when you're putting in dates and trying to figure out. But absolutely what Samantha said about like you might want a bunch of shorter flights instead. And it's okay to cancel. Like I said before, I mean, I have almost canceled more trips. I've canceled 2 trips to Sedona. I've never been there. We still haven't gone. I've canceled trips to Asheville. I canceled the one to England. I've canceled so many trips, but because I had the refundable, it was basically no big deal. And it's okay to cancel. Like you're not going to let people down. They love you. You're not going to let yourself down because you can go somewhere else at a different time. Just if you're not feeling well, do not go.
Yeah, and I will say, recently because my scans have been a little iffy, so to speak, and just a lot of uncertainty going on, I've been really hesitant to book the next trip. And it's like, I just need to book it. And like you said, it's okay to cancel. But like I've been so hesitant and I keep on pushing it out and it's like stop it. Just book the trip. And if the dates don't work, they don't work and you'll figure it out, but just get it on the calendar. And so yeah, I kind of am saying that to people, but I need to do that myself too.
Well, and I will say too, like when I was first diagnosed, I didn't want to plan anything past the next set of scans because I was so terrified of progression and that it was going to ruin things for the kids because like I said, we generally travel with kids. So as someone who travels with children, what I have learned to do after, I don't know, 6 months, a year, well, it was after COVID, maybe longer, is that it's okay to book it, get the travel insurance or the refundable, whatever, and don't tell the kids right away. Keep that kind of, because you don't want to disappoint children. That's like heartbreaking. It's one thing for us to choose to cancel for rational reasons, but they're looking forward to something. So we try to keep that close to what, the kids know, like this summer, they know we're going on summer vacation. We haven't really told them what week we're going, like they kind of know generally where we're going, just because there's nothing worse than letting down your kids when they already have to deal with cancer in their lives. So that would be my tip as a parent or someone that's traveling with children.
In fact, I mean, it could also make it almost nicer because then it's this like surprise. Oh my goodness, in 2 weeks I'm going to, wherever. So that could be more fun for them, in fact. So medical issues, Samantha, touched on some of these things, but, of course, check with your oncologist. Mask up if you're immune compromised or if you just don't want to deal with having cancer and a cold or being sick. compression socks. Samantha, I don't know if you wore them, but like I actually always wear them now when I fly, unless it's like 2 hours or less or something. There are seat exercises that you can do. Drink lots of water, which actually helps you get up more often. you know, um, walk in the aisle if you need to. Take that low dose aspirin or another blood thinner. Ask your oncologist. Samantha said that she did. But there's videos of how to buy compression socks on YouTube. You should really measure your calf to get the right sized ones. There's videos about like exercises that you can do. Just everything that you can do to prepare will help bring down that stress that you may feel while you're stuck on that, as Samantha said, that metal tube.
And also wear super comfortable clothing, especially baggy clothing, in terms of your pants. I was going to say trousers then, but trousers or pants, whatever country you're from, ensure they're baggy because the blood clot that I did get from traveling 6 months prior to my diagnosis, I was wearing really tight jeggings, jean leggings. And I 100% believe that that contributed to it a lot because my circulation wasn't good. And that added to the constriction of the blood vessels. So make sure you're wearing super baggy clothing, you're comfortable, and you're not causing any constrictions unnecessarily.
In terms of booking trains, and again, like because I go to Europe a lot, I'm used to taking trains. Again, look at those transfer times, but it is nice that generally in Europe, if you miss your connection, you can just be on the next train and it's not really that big of a deal. Stairs. Some places have elevators, but very few. And sometimes you only have 6 minutes to get from one track to another track. And you have all these stairs. So we personally are carry-on only people, and we only bring enough that even like my husband, if he really needs to, he can grab both of our luggage and carry them up and down the stairs. There's even sometimes stairs inside of a train. So absolutely going from like, I know we're not used to trains as much in the United States, but you might be in a station that has 12 different tracks and your train comes in on track 2 and you need to get over to track 10. That's going to be down the stairs, through like a little tunnel, up again, whatever, all while there's tons of people around you. So think about that when you're booking your trains.
So Japan also has a lot of trains and the underground. And what I will say is if you don't want to have a wheelie luggage to kind of pick up and move around, we use duffel bags that we just put on our backs. It saves so much time and energy. And we were kind of laughing at all the tourists that had these massive suitcases that were trying to lug up the stairs. So just be cognizant of what type of luggage you are packing and if it is suitable for you in terms of different modes of transportation. I know in Japan as well, it was really hard to stow luggage on the train near your seat if you had a wheelie luggage. So it was better to have a duffel. So just kind of put those things into your mind. Again, less stress, the better. So just think about ahead of time what type of luggage you want to take especially when you're using trains.
Now, booking lodging, again, free cancellation is a great thing. I use booking.com all the time. I know some people like to book direct with hotels, but I love free cancellation. It's really good if you do have a special diet or a very sensitive stomach due to treatment. Then it can be nice to get a place with a kitchen. Of course, there's apartments, but more and more there's actually hotels with little kitchenettes. I personally like to stay like right in the middle of things. Before diagnosis, I remember one time in Paris, we were literally across the river from Notre Dame, or we just stayed in Venice and we just stayed right in the middle of things. Um, or picking some place that's very close to transportation so that you can just walk out your door and go to where you want to go, and you don't have that, like, if you were staying someplace farther out, I know they can often be cheaper or whatever, but then, there's kind of the cost of time, right? And the agony of, oh, okay, well, now we have to take a subway there and we have to do this and we have to do that. So sometimes it is nice to be in the middle of things. Think about whether there's stairs versus elevators. In Europe, there's a lot of buildings that are very old and do not have elevators in them. If that's something that you can't handle, then definitely make sure that you get a place either on a lower floor or with elevators. And just a little thing to note, in several other countries, the first floor is not the ground floor as it is in the United States. The first floor is what in the United States we would call the second floor. So you have to be aware of that. When we were in Venice, it was really good actually, because it was like a whole hotel made of apartments. So we had a separate living room. And so if I wanted to go and rest during the day for a couple hours or take a nap, my husband could be in the living room and doing whatever, and he wasn't disturbing me. So that can be a nice thing to have as well. And I'm a huge fan of patios and balconies, because like when we went to Lake Como, we had a balcony that was overlooking the lake. I had just been diagnosed like 5 months before. There were times I was not feeling well, but sitting on the balcony, my husband with a little cappuccino, us eating our little treats, just sitting on the balcony, we still felt like we were doing something, even though we were just sitting there. So those can be things that you might want to look for in booking lodging.
Yeah, Caroline, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, for me personally, location is critical. Not having that added time, added stress of getting to the places you want to go to. And then a kitchen, I will say, so in Japan, we stayed in a lot of hotels, but there were times where I was just so tired from walking 35,000 steps a day that I wanted to just eat a meal in the room. So we would just go to 7-Eleven, and if you've been to Japan, you know how amazing 7-Eleven is, and get a bunch of food to have in the room. But ideally, I would have loved to have had a kitchen, just to have the ability to cook some food myself, and be able to relax at the same time makes a big difference when you want some downtime.
Sometimes even if you're in a hotel, just making sure that the room has a table and some chairs, so that if you do want to get takeout from a restaurant or, from the supermarket, we've definitely done that in both Italy and Switzerland, going to the COP, and just picking something up. But it is nice at least if there's some place to sit, so it's not just like having to sit on your bed and eat food.
Well, with the eating, I guess because I'm traveling with kids, we try to do some of these things anyways, just because kids are unpredictable. I will say one thing that works well for us when we've done things like Disney World. Before our cruise, we flew into Miami. I've used, excuse me, Instacart to deliver groceries to the room, because then you can order them on the plane, you can order them in the airport, tell them what time they show up, and it's all things that are kind of grab and go because of the kids, but it does help to have something like peanut butter crackers is a big one for us. If you're a little nauseous, that sometimes helps. So I do think just kind of being aware of what your resort or your hotel or whatnot offers, so that you can think outside the box if you need to when you're preparing, would be good.
Now, Samantha mentioned travel insurance before. I have travel insurance, but it doesn't actually cover anything related to cancer because I have an annual plan. But people still break legs. People still do other things, you know. So, and other things may happen. So I like having travel insurance for that. Um, just general travel insurance. I think that there is travel insurance that if you get it within like 14 days of booking your trip, that you can get a certain kind that would cover things even related to cancer, to pre-existing conditions. Um, and then also checking with your regular insurance, like my regular health insurance. If I need to go to the emergency room in Europe or another country, like I can go to the emergency room. It's weird. I think it actually covers emergency room visits, but not doctor's visits. So just calling up your regular health insurance and asking what they cover. Also, there is Triage Cancer, which is an organization that's amazing. They do lots of things like helping people with cancer navigate like the filing for disability and what your rights are in the workplace and stuff. But they also do have a page all about travel insurance. But I maybe Samantha or Leah can add more to talking about travel insurance.
I mean,
Yeah.
for,
Oh, go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Leah. Sorry. No, go ahead.
From my experience, we typically have done just, even through Airbnb or like airlines or like the cruise, we've just kind of purchased the travel insurance that comes along with things. We do check, like I think Samantha may have said that she gets coverage worldwide with her health insurance. We have checked when we've traveled out of the country, like what would be covered if I were to need medical care. But generally speaking, another great place to plan vacations, I think for anyone, but definitely with kids, is through Costco. If you have a Costco membership, because they do a lot of, it's that in between of like a tour and your own thing, but they offer travel insurance through them. Last year, I took my son to Punta Cana for spring break his senior year, and I'm taking my daughter to Cancun this year for her senior year. And that's at an all inclusive. So I always do the insurance policy on that. So, and they actually will let you cancel up to 24 hours if you pay for the insurance. So,
Wow.
no matter what it is. So that's kind of nice to know too. Like you just kind of have to do your research on where you're going and what's covered in the insurance policy.
And as Leah said, what's covered is really important. So make sure you do read the fine print and you look at the details. I know I mentioned medevacs prior, but medical evacuation is really important piece to have. You never know what's going to happen, regardless of if it's related to cancer or not. You want to get that medevac piece of the insurance to ensure that if anything bad happens, you can get evacuated out back to the United States. So a really important thing to consider.
So now talking about setting limits and receiving accommodations. Okay, so setting limits for yourself and for your companions. Boundaries are such a good, healthy thing to have in all parts of your life. I like to plan kind of one event per day to give myself resting time. If I don't need the resting time, great. We could go out and do something else, especially if we are staying in the middle of town and we could just walk out the door and just do whatever. Um, or you can alternate like big days with rest days. I always try and buy tickets for a lot of things like ahead of time, just so I don't have to stand in those super long lines outside of museums or other attractions, wearing comfortable clothes. You'll look like a tourist, but everybody looks like a tourist. Who cares? And if rich food makes you sick, then find a restaurant closer to your hotel. So that you can get home back to the hotel quickly afterwards. So those are some things that can really help you. And then also making compromises. So like before you're even there, before you're even on the trip, just set expectations with your companions about what you may or may not be able to do. Also tell them like that you're fine. If you need to rest, they can still go out and do things if you feel comfortable with that, or have them bring things that they can do while you're resting, or even, as we mentioned before, picking up food to eat at the hotel or apartment that you have.
Yeah, you covered that also well. I definitely set expectations with my husband ahead of time. And I was like, look, if I want a nap, I don't want to feel bad that you're also in this amazing country and you want to explore and you might have to hang out with me. I'm like, you can go out and do things. So he would go out, he would explore, he would have some food on his own. And I didn't feel guilty because I kind of set that expectation and he was totally fine. But yeah, setting those expectations ahead of time, I think is really important. And in Japan specifically, you don't sit down in public unless you're like inside a restaurant or inside somewhere. So there aren't any places where you can just sit down and rest. So we had to take that into consideration, and so we split up our day quite a bit so that I could come back to the hotel, actually sit down and have a rest.
Ask for accommodations. This was kind of brought up before, but if you need extra help or anything, I recently traveled by myself. I didn't have my husband, who is my emotional and physical support animal, who helps me when I travel. He wasn't with me. I did ask to board the plane early. I had like a little card from my cancer center. I kind of took it. She didn't even care. She's like, "Yeah, go ahead," you know. So asking for accommodations can really help. And Leah, I think maybe you had a bunch to say about this as well.
Yes, so there are several places we've traveled that have programs for people with diseases like ours, and they will actually give you special accommodations. When we traveled to Disney World, and we've been, I think, 3 times since I've been diagnosed, because that's kind of where the kids wanted to go. And I do think they've changed their policy a little bit. All I had to do was walk in to customer relations and say, I have stage 4 lung cancer. They didn't ask for proof or anything. We automatically got to jump lines. I think now they're just doing it for children, but it's worth looking into. Universal Studios has a policy. Some hotels have a policy where they'll give you the bigger, larger rooms at no upgrades so that you have more space. So it's definitely worth checking with your hotel or your attractions you're going to if there is anything for people with what they consider disabilities. I always travel with a letter from my oncologist with my specific diagnosis on there. And of course it says stage 4 lung cancer. And it, says all the things we don't want to read, but it basically says that, it's a terminal diagnosis, and therefore, and then I'm currently on treatment for that. And that's, if you need anything, that's going to be it. It's just that letter.
So what to bring? So in terms of luggage, if you're moving around a lot, not on a tour, you have to do your own luggage. Again, I'm personally a big carry-on person. I like having the wheels, again, running through airports or walking to the hotel from the train station or whatever. I like having the wheels. It's a lot easier, and it doesn't make me out of breath. Um, and maybe trying to book if it's a longer trip, then maybe booking someplace in the middle like an Airbnb or something that has laundry, or finding the laundromat in town, or having the hotel do it. It just can make it a lot easier if you're not lugging so much luggage around.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, I'm a duffel girl, so I'll do a carry-on duffel bag that I can put on my back. Again, as Caroline said, I don't want it to be super heavy, so I usually take the bare minimum and do laundry at the hotel myself, and it's really saved me in multiple times to not have a really, really large suitcase. So just think about where you're going and what type of luggage might be best for you.
And I would add, because I'm not in a major city, I have to fly out of Louisville, Kentucky. The airport doesn't have many direct flights, nothing internationally. So there's always transfers, and it's very hard. And sometimes you get on a plane that's very tiny, and even though you've got your rollaway that meets the requirements, they say you've got to check it at the gate. So I always make sure that I have a rolling bag and a carry-on, what I consider a carry-on like bag that fits on the handle of my rolling suitcase. But I want to make sure that all my medication can stay with me. So even though I'm not checking a bag, I always still make sure that the medication, paperwork, anything special that I need or important is always in that shoulder bag. Or backpack, for that exact reason, because if they do check it, even though they say they're going to give it to you right at the gate, but if you've got a transfer, it just kind of it can get hairy carry. We've had that happen. So that would be my biggest piece of advice on luggage, is just make sure if you have a purse or a backpack or whatever, keep that kind of stuff with you at all times.
Yeah, absolutely, especially medicine. But I even sometimes will put an extra pair of like a pair or two of like undies, socks, t-shirt, in that personal item that stays with me just in case. Like, I don't want to have to deal with having cancer, being someplace that's not home, and not having any of my clothes. So even just having those couple things in your personal item and not just in your carry-on can be helpful as well. So trolley sleeve, I included, I know, Leah, you like that Calpac Luca bag, so I made sure to put that in there. But
My
having a
favorite.
trolley sleeve, if you have a rolling that you can just slide it on, and it's not going to fall off, and it's not going to, you know, when you're going through the airport or whatever. And I even, when I fly economy, sometimes I want to stretch out my legs. So I've actually tried to pare down my personal item into something even smaller so that I can put my legs out under the seat in front of me as well. So prescriptions, I put mine, this is my little, you can see my messed up nails there from Tagrisso, but I have a hot pink little bag because I will not forget that hot pink bag. I put my Tagrisso in there. I put other things in there. I love that it fits like 3 bottles and it has pockets on each side. I just got it on Amazon. But as Leah said, always put it in your personal item in case even your carry-on is taken away from you if it's gate checked. I've had 2 of my trips extended. One because of we were in Florida and there was a storm up here, a blizzard, and we couldn't make it back. So I was so grateful that I had extra Tagrisso, my TKI with me, um, and pain medicine, Imodium, any side effect medication you might need. Leah maybe can tell us more about the pre-prescribed packs that your doctor gives you. Anything for dry skin or lips, nail repair. I have on the next slide my favorite kind of nail repair, extra pair of glasses, sunscreen, hats, anything to protect yourself from the sun, including that lip balm, SPF. We kind of forget about that sometimes, but I did when I was in Switzerland. We're up in the mountains, and I ended up getting some sores on my lips actually from them getting sunburnt.
Yeah, so I see a concierge medicine doctor for my primary care physician, and she's very good at when I tell her where I'm going. Like, for instance, when I went to Punta Cana with my son, you know, he was 18 years old. Even though he's an adult legally, he's not really an adult. And we were traveling to a resort with a large group of people that he went to school with and their parents, but I didn't really know anyone that well. So when I talked to my primary care physician about it, I said, I just am nervous about, like, what if I get sick over there? I don't know what the medical care is going to be like there or the quality and whatnot. So she went ahead and she prescribes, when I travel out of the country, she gives me a prescription for a prednisone pack, for a antibiotic, just amoxicillin, something kind of generic, and also for Cipro in case there was any kind of like urinary tract infection. She also makes sure that I have Finagrin, that is a suppository, which I know is, but it's part of it, and the dissolvable Zofran. So I always travel with those things. My medicine would never fit in that cute little pink pouch because I take all of that. Plus I take Imodium and I take Advil and I take aspirin. I mean, I take all the things just in case. I also take Neosporin ointment and Band-Aids and the little things I put on my fingers when they are torn up. And so I take all of that stuff. We call it the Phillips Pharmacy, and I just take it with me. And, you know, it says an expiration date on there. So I really even take it when I fly domestically, because with her, she says, call me before you take anything and I'll guide you as to what you need to take. But at least we know you have quality control medications from the United States, that we're not just trying to willy-nilly something together, you know, out of the country or wherever. So that has been very helpful. And I find that a lot of doctors will do that for you.
And I have a little bit of a different perspective. So on top of my regular oncologist, I also have an integrative oncologist that I work with. And so I take a lot of vitamins and supplements. And when I was going to Japan for 10 days, you know, I also call my pharmacy Samantha Pharmacy, because the amount of pills I was taking with me was absolutely insane. And I didn't have room to take all of the bottles. So I put them in like sandwich bags or baggies. And then I thought, wait a minute, what happens if customs looks at all of these pills and are like, what on earth are these? And I didn't have an explanation. So what I did was I took a picture of each pill next to the bottle to kind of show them, if they stopped me, what vitamin was associated with what bottle, and that these were legitimate and they weren't something that I was trying to smuggle to a different country. So just bear that in mind when you're going overseas. A lot of customs people can be suspicious of just random pills in your bag. So making sure you have the bottle or some picture to associate with is very, very important.
I agree with that. I do typically travel with, I have it actually sitting right here next to me. It's not full right now, a pill container. And I put
Mm-hmm.
all my supplements, my vitamins, and all the different things that I take to complement my treatment in those. And I do the same thing. I take a picture of the front of the bottle and the back of the bottle
Yeah.
and the pill sitting next to it so that they can say, oh, this one, this red one matches this thing or
Yeah.
whatever. I've never had a problem with it, but I do always put my supplements in those little containers because I figure if I don't have the entire bottle of whatever, it would be okay if I miss some of those. But I do take my entire bottle of Tagrisso or whatnot.
And I think, Leah, you mentioned that you also have a letter in general stating your diagnosis. So probably, like, yes, it's good to have the individual prescriptions, but even just having that, it would be make it more understandable as to
Mm-hmm.
why someone would have so many pills on them, probably. So check with your oncologist. This is just what I do because I fly a lot with time changes. What I do is, because I take my Tagrisso at 7 p.m. every night, I take it at 7 p.m., but then the next day I take it at 6, and then the next day at 5 and 4 and 3 and 2, until I get onto the time zone. And then when I get there, 2 p.m. here is 7 p.m. there. So I just kind of do the opposite when I come home. But absolutely talk to your oncologist about it. I don't know, Leah, if you have,
So when I
if you're
travel,
changing time zones a
I
lot.
just pretend that that's my regular time. And I asked my local oncologist and I've asked my oncologist that I saw at Bandy about the whole, like, since I take Tagrisso, it's a certain time every morning. Do I need to stick with that? And she said, because of the half-life in it, not necessarily. That's my doctor's opinion. So don't take, ask your doctor for sure. So I just, whatever time I take it usually at 7 o'clock in the morning here. I make sure that I take it about 12 hours apart. And I don't really get like, or 24 hours apart, every 24 hours, I just try to take it and I don't get hung up. And if I'm going to be somewhere for a long time, I will like say, okay, yeah, there's a 5 hour time difference, but I'm just going to stay taking it at 7 o'clock in the morning, whatever time zone I'm in, because when I get back home, I'm not likely to forget. Because especially with Tagrisso, some people only take the full dose. Some people take a half dose. Some people double the dose. And that's kind of how my oncologist explained it to me, that it was okay to kind of not be so strict, but that may not be the best for you. So don't necessarily do as I'm saying, but check with your oncologist for sure.
So I have encountered a couple travel related medical issues. I do not usually get paronychia on my toes, but often when I travel, even if I only usually get a couple thousand steps a day here, I go on a trip and I get 12,000 steps, and then suddenly I get a little flare up on my toe. Um, and not being able to walk can really affect your trip. I mean, it makes a huge difference if every step is agony. So be prepared, talk to your palliative care team ahead of time. If you do get paronychia at home, like if you do vinegar soaks or other things, then you can actually soak. If there's anything that you normally use at home that works, you can soak cotton balls in things and put them in Ziploc bags, and you're allowed to take that through um, security. Neosporin ointment, blister bandages, whatever it is that you think that you might need. It's better to bring it and not need it than to be in some little town somewhere, like going to all the pharmacias trying to, find what you need. Diarrhea, if you have TKI, and that's something that you deal with, you might want to be conservative in what you eat. I mentioned before, if you're going to have a rich dinner, maybe someplace closer to the hotel. carry Imodium with you. Scout out bathroom locations ahead of time. You can even just kind of go on Google Maps ahead of time, and you might want to put stars and where there's bathroom locations. I was just in a group the other day with someone who is ALK positive, and she was saying they have the opposite problem, that they have a lot of constipation. It's a very common problem actually for all people who travel. Like travel constipation is a thing. So eating more high fiber foods might help, and maybe even scheduling like a rest day where you can take a laxative the night before whenever you normally take them, and you can kind of just take care of that somewhere in the middle of the trip might be a good thing.
I also travel because I can get really bad mouth sores. So that's something I travel with all my mouth sore medicines just in case. So I do agree. Like, there's something you're prone to, make sure you take it, especially if it's a prescription that you need to take care of it.
It was funny when we were in Venice, I noticed my bag and my husband's bag next to each other on the counter. So I just took a picture of them. He brings hardly anything. I bring a million different things. And as you can see on the left in my bag, I have a lot of little containers. And you can see it here in the top picture. So there are things that I use like Medi honey for mouth sores. I'm only there for like a week or 10 days. I just need a little bit. I don't need to bring the whole container. So I, just bought a bunch of these little things at the Container Store off Amazon. And all I need is a little bit, just enough for that week. But I would rather, they don't take up that much space, and I would rather have them and not need them than, like I said before, be running around trying to find these things. I really do like this Orly nail rescue. So if you are having splitting nails or whatever, it's actually really nice because the bottle is tiny. So it's very easy to put in your toiletry bag, but you just like put on the glue and then go in the powder. It doesn't always look the prettiest, but it's a lot better than having your nail rip off. I'm a huge fan of Supergoop Unseen Sunscreen. I have a lot
Love
of
Supergoop. Love it.
sunscreen. I have a lot of skin issues. I had them kind of before diagnosis. Tagrisso just makes them worse. And a lot of things, in fact, the person who's ALK positive told me their medicine can make them extremely, extremely sensitive to sun. So, the sunscreen is good, the lip balm with the SPF. I like Neosporin cream. I also actually bring ointment too, but I like having the cream is good. From Tagrisso once I got sores on my scalp. The ointment just made it kind of itchy, but cream cleared it up. I mean, don't take my medical advice on that. If you have that issue, talk to your oncologist. But sometimes it is nice to have the cream because it doesn't get the oily stuff on your clothes or anything else. And then tiny little containers. I got them on Amazon. They're tiny, but of like my nail strengthener and other things is kind of nice so that I can redo my nails in the middle of the week. And the Medi honey, like I said, for my mouth. Is there things that you guys like to bring?
Sunscreen is just the number one for me. At the time of my Japan trip, I was on traditional chemotherapy, and it does make you more sensitive to the sun. So even though it was November, I still took sunscreen. I do get chapped lips. In fact, I have chapped lips right now, so having lip balm handy is also my go-to.
Yeah, same thing, but I've gotten in the habit of just daily sunscreen every day. I do that every day here, probably because I'm older and need it. But I just think it's a good habit to get into. So I do take sunscreen with me, but especially I think for the lips, I think, oh, my face is covered if we're just out on touring around or whatever. Or I've got sunscreen on my body or whatever it is, but then you kind of forget about your lips, and that, like Caroline said, can cause sores and they hurt. So it's always good to bring that with you too.
Comfort items. Sometimes you just want to have things that you have at home that make you happy and you might want on your trip. I'll have Leah talk about these first two, but I did not really have like I think every day when I'm just hanging out at home, I wear like a hoodie. I didn't bring that in Venice. And because it was the end of October, the beginning of November, it was actually a little bit chilly sometimes, like in the apartment. And I really wish that I brought kind of more like loungewear or like pajamas or like a hoodie or something like that, like that I could wear kind of every day. And I didn't care if it got like a little bit, gross or whatever. So I could save my going out clothes for like leaving the house. But I do wish that I'd kind of had my little, my security blanket of a hoodie with me as well.
Yeah, I was the one that suggested the lightweight blanket because it is cold inevitably in hotels and uh, airport waiting around, really anywhere. And I personally, what I travel with is a scarf. It's really a scarf, but it's big enough to kind of just be a lightweight blanket. And that way, if it's like Caroline said, you go somewhere and it ends up being colder than you thought, you can also wear it as a scarf or like as around your shoulders or something. So I do take that. And then snacks, I do like to take those because especially if you're traveling to a different country or even different place, sometimes you just need a little something in your stomach with your medicines or whatnot, and it's not readily available. So if I take peanut butter crackers or pretzels or some nuts or some granola with me in the little individual packets, then I have them for when I need them. And it's definitely been helpful. Just you don't have to think, it's right with you, and it doesn't take up a lot of room. I try to get things that don't crumble super easily, but I've actually taken a pencil box that's like a rectangular hard case, and I'll put like 3 or 4, 5 different little snacks in there and close it so it's hard so they don't break, and throw it in my personal item. And that's kind of nice to have too.
Yeah, my husband and I have done a lot of trips domestically driving, and gas stations notoriously do not have the best healthy options. And so I bring so many snacks when we do road trips, just so when my husband's binging out on unhealthy food from gas stations, I still have my go-to snacks that I'm comfortable with and that make me happy. So even when you're going domestically somewhere, in particular driving, just be aware that having those comfort snacks that you're familiar with can make a lot of difference.
So treating yourself. We all have financial toxicity. It's we have lung cancer. We have it. I had to stop working. We have copays. We have all kinds of things. But there are certain times that I am willing to save money. There are certain times when I want to treat myself. Fortunately, a couple years actually before I was diagnosed, I started doing that whole like airline miles stuff. So we actually have a good amount of miles and I can use them for upgrades and stuff like that. But there are times when, yeah, it's worth the money. So allowing yourself luxuries that are related to comfort. Take that Uber at the end of the day. You've been walking around, you went to the Coliseum, you went to whatever, you're exhausted. Just take that Uber back to the hotel. Don't deal with like going on the subway or walking or whatever. Like, you need to take care of yourself. Upgrade to a slightly larger room if you're going to spend the majority of your day there, or get a room, like I said before, with a balcony or something else where it still feels special, even just being in the room or having a nicer view. So don't be penny wise but pound foolish or emotional foolish. Like, take care of yourself.
Yeah, and I have a prime example of this. So we had booked a bus ticket when we landed in Tokyo to take us to the hotel, but we didn't know how long it would take us to deboard, go through customs, etc. So we booked a bus ticket like 3 hours after we landed to give us a buffer. And when we landed and went through customs, it all went through really quickly. And then I was like, oh, we have a 2.5 hour wait now for our bus ticket. Um, and I asked my husband, like, how much did we pay for this bus ticket? He's like $9. And I'm like, yeah, not waiting. We're getting a taxi. And so we paid the $60 and got the taxi because life is short. I think we realize, especially with this diagnosis, that sometimes screw it, let's just go the easier route. Again, less stress and more comfortable to get to your destination. So that's what we did.
I mean, we've kind of like taken that stance too. Like we've paid to upgrade to first class. We've taken Ubers instead of just taking mass transit. I mean, at some point it is, you only live once, YOLO, like we just try to be smart about it. Don't maybe book everything, first class, bigger room, this, that, and the other, but pick and choose the things that really matter and are going to, in the long run, make a difference.
So specific treatment tips. I've already talked a lot about TKIs, restroom access, bringing extra pills, getting rest. I think we've gone over that. So let's have Samantha talk about infusions.
Yeah, so being on chemotherapy and immunotherapy and makes a big difference compared to being on a TKI. And the reason being is likely you will have an infusion every 3 weeks and you'll have certain symptoms and side effects during a certain time frame after that treatment occurs. So I always made sure that when I traveled that I did not plan a big trip right around the time when I knew I was going to have my worst symptoms and side effects. And usually for me, it was about 4 or 5 days of just feeling like meh, where I just wouldn't have wanted to travel or do anything. And so I planned around that. What I will say is every single person is different in terms of how you feel after chemo and or immunotherapy. And so once you've been through a few rounds, you'll begin to know when your symptoms start coming up and when they start becoming less. And so planning trips around that is critical. It sucks. It really does, but it's just the reality of what the treatment is that we're on, and making sure you don't plan a big trip when you're going to have your worst side effects, because that is just not a pleasant experience. And usually I will say in terms of planning, if you want to plan a trip 4 months out, you can usually do the math or speak to your oncology team on when your treatment will fall 4 months in advance. Obviously treatment might change depending on scans, etc. But if you are on the same treatment, you should be able to do the math and figure it out in terms of when those worst days will be in 4 months, as an example. So let's also talk about immunity precautions. So I know based on my treatment that my immunity is going to be compromised on certain days. Your oncology team will be able to tell you what days those are after treatment. And so again, ensuring that your trips don't necessarily align with those days is really important. Usually my side effects and my low immunity went side by side, so I would just avoid those days. But you should be able to check with your care team on when those low days are in terms of immunity, and just ensuring that you're not in large crowds or exposing yourself unnecessarily to viruses or bacteria.
So after radiation, you might also want to think about timing of travel. So there's a period of fatigue after radiation. I just got radiation to my primary in December. I finished December 20th. But then there's the rare possibility of pneumonitis that can develop months down the road. So there's kind of like a little window that might be a little safer for traveling after the fatigue is gone, but before any possible pneumonitis. So I actually took that time to go and visit my parents, kind of in between those two things, that kind of sweet spot.
Okay, so I want to take a few minutes just to thank Samantha for her time today. She actually has to get to an appointment, so she's going to jump off of here, but we do appreciate all of her expert travel tips. And Samantha, is there anything else you'd like to say before you leave?
Take the trip. If you want to go on a trip, plan it, take it if you feel comfortable, and also always check with your oncology team on whether that trip is suitable for you or not. So those are my 3 pointers.
Thank you so much. Good luck at your appointment.
Thank you. Bye.
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 So the next slide is traveling immediately after surgery tips. So as most of you know, I had a lobectomy at the end of October with Dr. Antonoff at MD Anderson, and a lot of people are going to get opinions from her and actually going through with surgery. in Houston. And for many of us, even if it weren't in Houston at MD Anderson, there's not large cancer centers around, and you would have to travel for your lobectomy. So again, you want to check with your surgical team before you make any of these decisions. But things that worked for me were to fly first class on the way home, because I was afraid of people bumping into me. I was just real sore and nervous, and that also gave me less germs around, I guess, being first class. So my husband, he sat in the back in economy, and my mom and I sat first class so that we could have that extra room. Make sure when you're packing that you think about how much you're taking with you, because you won't be able to lift after surgery. So they didn't even want me pulling my suitcase. So you may need to have something that the person who's traveling with you can pull or carry or whatnot. So make sure that that is a-okay. I did like taking a pillow on the way home, just because if you cough, and that's common after surgery, kind of like just hugging it kind of lessen the jarring, I guess, of the coughing. And then I did, and it was recommended to me from MD Anderson to wear a mask on the way home. I actually wore a mask there because I didn't want to risk getting sick before surgery. But definitely wear a mask home, because you are a little compromised, because you've just had major surgery. And use your hand sanitizer, wash hands.
Yeah, and that's all, I think, great advice. And even though I am a carry-on person, this is absolutely one of those times when checking luggage could be the right thing to do. If you're having a problem, if you can't manage your own luggage, then absolutely checking, I think, can be the right thing to do.
Another thing you could do, I was able to walk, but for some people you may need a wheelchair. So because you walk in the hospital, and then they take you out in a wheelchair to your car or wherever you're going. But you can arrange before you leave the hospital. MD Anderson will actually help you. So I'm sure other places will too, to have a wheelchair, and that keeps people from crowding as well. Most major cancer institutes have some kind of travel assistance program. MD Anderson, for example, they use United. So if they book your flights through United, you do not have a cancellation fee. You don't have a change of date fee. So with surgery, it was kind of up in the air as like how many days you have to be there. So we booked through them on United, and then that way we ended up extending by 1 additional day with no issue. That just takes a little of the stress and worry out there. Definitely you're going to be a little tired, you're fatigued, you're sore. So I would recommend tennis shoes, something that you feel stable in, not a flip flop, not a heeled shoe, so that you can keep your balance. Typically you're given blood thinners the week after surgery, so you don't really have to worry about blood clots after flying, while you're flying home. So getting up and walking and all that is typically not an issue. So that's one thing to know ahead of time. Okay, just some general tips after surgery and traveling. Again, make sure you check with your care team. Don't just take my word for it, but take breaks and rest in the afternoon, because as you're recovering from surgery, you are tired more easily. Wear your mask if you're going to be in a large crowd, because like I said, you're compromised. Your immune system is a little bit compromised. One thing I found helpful was to wear a sling. It just supports that side of your body that's had surgery. Plus, when somebody sees a sling, they think you're hurt, so they're less likely to bump into you or whatnot. So that was good. Consider your altitude. I flew to California from Kentucky after Christmas. California doesn't have extreme high altitudes or whatnot, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going somewhere that was going to kind of change my breathing, because sometimes you get in those high altitude spaces and your breathing is harder, and then you think, oh my gosh, have I progressed? Is there something wrong? But it's really just the altitude. Make sure you take your medicines for pain control and like nerve pain, because nerve pain can last for several months after surgery, and you don't want to be caught without that. And then just really ask your surgeon if there's anything you should do specifically since you just had surgery. And then the big thing for me is scar management. I don't want a terrible, my incision's 6 inches long, so I'm very careful with protecting that incision. So check with your dermatologist or your surgeon about what you can do to protect that incision with sunscreen.
All right, so that was all great advice about surgery. Maybe I'll have to use that one day. You never know.
You never know.
So just in case, it's good to be prepared. ask for copies of your medical records, or as Leah mentioned, she has a letter summarizing her condition. Medical records on USB. I bring them on USB. I know Samantha mentioned this before, but in the UK, you get a Macmillan cancer support card that says, "Hey, can I use the restroom?" I have learned how to say I have lung cancer in both German and Italian now. So again, we mentioned searching for hospital and cancer center locations ahead of time, and having a list of all your emergency contacts and everything can really be helpful. And Leah, you had mentioned something like this.
Yes, so there are medical alert bracelets. I actually have one. It was gifted to me. I don't wear it daily, but if I'm going to be traveling alone, like I'm getting ready to travel alone in a few weeks, I will wear it just because it's good to have, if you don't have somebody with you that knows what's going on, if you're unconscious for whatever reason, which is terrible to think about, but it could happen, and not even just cancer related. It could be an accident or whatever. And that has a QR code on it, and you can scan it, and you just enter, when you buy it, you enter all your information, all your doctors, your diagnosis, what medications you're on, the dosages, the time of day you take them, insurance information. And that is just like a kind of insurance policy in itself, that everyone, most people have phones that can scan these QR codes, and they would have everything right there at their fingertips with phone numbers and all the things.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I think it's brilliant. I've never done that before, but I'm so glad to know about it.
I think I was gifted it, but I think it was only like $12 or $15 off Amazon. So it's not a major expense for sure.
And then the last advice is, Samantha said, go take all the trips, but have a good time. You are making memories, you are treating yourself, you are realizing that you're still alive. Just have a great time when you travel.
I agree. And, a lot of this battle for us with lung cancer is just the mental and emotional toll it takes on your person, yourself and your family. And traveling is a way to make you feel better. It, gives you life, and just getting out of the cancer world a little bit, where people don't know that you're sick, nobody's asking you about it, is just really life-giving. So, Caroline, do you have any last minute or last things you would like to say?
No, just sometimes it almost feels like you're leaving your cancer at home. I mean, when you're at home, you have so many routines, feeding the dog, doing the laundry, the dishes, the whatever. When you travel, you leave all of that behind, but you also kind of leave your cancer behind sometimes. And the best is, those days or those hours when you forget you even have it.
Yes, agreed, for sure. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in to our episode on traveling with lung cancer. And hopefully you'll find this valuable and informative. But please remember, check with your oncologist or your care team, because we are not medical experts. We're just people out there living day to day with this diagnosis. And these are our tips and tricks.